This happened when I was in my early teens in the late 1980s. My family lived in a very secluded forested area. We had a long driveway and our small home sat on a square acre of mowed grass with woods on two sides. I was alone late one night talking with a buddy from school. I often rode my bike to town over the summer, and he invited me to come over and spend the night. It was a 20-mile trip over completely empty country roads, but it was always an adventure and I seldom hesitated to go when I had a place to stay. I told him it was a sure thing. I would call my mother at work and then start my ride. Here's where it gets creepy. Once I hung up the phone and started getting dressed, all in black, I picked up the phone again to call my mom. The line was dead. This had never happened before. It was a sturdy rotary phone and we never had problems with it. My thoughts instantly went to the small phone box on the back of the house. It was a tiny round junction with nothing but a rubber covering. Behind the cover was the exposed connection between the phone pole and our inside line. The wires were twisted together and capped, but completely vulnerable. I questioned why I would even think about that. Why would I jump to conclusions about the cause of the dead line? I was overwhelmed with a feeling of dread that did not make sense, and I was wrestling with my thoughts. I decided to behave as though I was in real danger, but calm myself by focusing on how unlikely it was and how my imagination was probably getting the best of me. But I could not shake the feeling that I was in trouble. I finished dressing and strapped a buck knife to my hip. One of those old Rambo-style knives with the compass in the handle. It was cheap but very big. I moved quietly and planned how I would leave the house. I remember this very well. I would slide out the front door and pull it closed behind me, locked. I would not be able to get back in. I would grab my bike from against the wall on the enclosed porch, spin around, use my elbow to press the button on the handle of the screen door, and jump down the concrete steps. I would hop on my bike and speed down the driveway. It was very dark outside, but there were bright lights in the front and rear of the house that created big pools of light in the yard. That was all the light I would have. I executed my plan just as I imagined, but my elbow slipped off the button on the handle and banged into the door as it opened. Within seconds, I was pumping down the gravel drive. I turned my head to the left, filling my ears with the roar of air I was cutting through, and stopped pedaling, my eyes fixed on the rear of the house. I was 100% sure someone was coming. I do not know how or why. It was only a moment, but I did not look away despite my own skepticism. At the last instant, I saw him. A man wearing dark clothes and a ski mask came tearing out of the lit yard around the back of the house and plunged into the deep shadow along the side, heading for the front, where I had been only seconds ago. I was invisible, wearing black from head to toe, and instead of running straight for me, he went for the porch, where the commotion I had just made had come from. I turned forward and leaned into the pedals. I could barely see the driveway, but I had ridden my bike down it many times at night, and I could make out the large stone gatepost before the dirt road. I almost wrecked turning the corner but recovered and sped away. About a mile farther, I finally stopped at the intersection with a paved road. My heart was pounding in my chest and my forehead was sweaty. I stood there for a bit and got my breathing under control while I tried to digest what had just happened. My thoughts were racing. I knew damn well what I saw, but I was out of danger. All I could do was press on. My neighbors were Amish with no phone. I would not have known what to say anyway. When I got to my friend's house much later, I told him what happened and called my mother. She listened and didn't give me a hard time, but I could tell she did not know what to think. She wouldn't be home until morning and said she would be careful. And that was it. I had heard laughter once from the edge of the woods, and things in the yard had been moved on occasion. But no one else had these experiences, and I assumed it was backwards Amish kids fooling around. Nothing had ever really happened before. I doubt Amish kids would know how to disconnect a phone line, though. So back in the year 2014, I went on a first date with a guy I had matched with on Tinder. I lived in Washington, D.C. at the time and worked on Capitol Hill for a U.S. congressman. I was 28 or 29 years old then. While he was nice, handsome, and a self-declared Southern gentleman, Tinder guy was extremely pushy leading up to our first date. My job was even more insanely busy than normal at that time, often requiring frequent all-nighters and leaving me with exactly zero social life. Looking back now, it's painfully obvious that I absolutely did not have the time or space in my life for dating back then. But after months of my best friend begging me to let her create a Tinder profile, I basically acquiesced and surrendered. For weeks, I tried to reschedule the first date because work was so crazy, but Tinder guy literally would not take no for an answer. He was extremely manipulative and clearly gifted at it. He guilt-tripped me and broke me down until I finally agreed to the first date. Only dinner was mentioned for the date, so I went on the date. While the date went fine on paper and probably looked normal to any bystanders, Tinder guy nonetheless kind of gave me the ick for some reason. At the time, I couldn't pinpoint why. He was polite, had a great job, was attractive, but something about the way he kept staring at me so intensely without blinking was extremely unsettling. It was like he was playing a weird, intense staring contest where he was the only contestant. There were a lot of other icks and red flags during our date, but the first major one was the fact that I felt casually held hostage, or at least it felt that way. At the end of our dinner, after politely thanking him for the meal, and knowing 100% that there would be no second or future dates with this guy, I tried to make my exit home, telling him I had a busy early work day ahead of me, which was true. Instead, Tinder guy, of course, pressured me into going to a bar next door with him for a nightcap. Looking back now, and thanks to therapy, I've learned a lot about manipulation and how it can be weaponized. Tinder guy was a master at this, and I had no chance. After 2 drinks that I didn't want, I again mentioned that I needed to get home, this time with a little more force. Tinder guy acted like he didn't hear me, got up and went to the bar before returning with beers for both of us. I was beginning to get annoyed and super pissed. After a few minutes, I faked an incoming phone call from my boss. I basically channeled my inner Meryl Streep and attempted to give the best acting performance of my life. And not to pat myself on the back or anything, but I should obviously get all the Oscars because, holy crap, it worked. The good news, Tinder guy totally bought my Oscar-worthy acting. He finally stopped ignoring my polite pleas to go home, and he agreed to let me, his hostage, go. However, he insisted on sharing an Uber home, even though we lived in completely separate neighborhoods nowhere near each other. Not to mention the very obvious fact that I absolutely did not want this creeper to gain any idea where I lived or come anywhere near my home. Quite frankly, I knew at that point that I did not want to spend one more minute nor have anything more to do with this creepy stranger, including being trapped in a confined space like a car with him. I tried to refuse repeatedly as I felt increasingly uncomfortable and obviously did not want him to see where I lived. But he literally wouldn't take no for an answer. So in a major what the hell are you doing moment, especially looking back now 10 years later, I silently endured my anxiety and protests, and we proceeded to Uber to my neighborhood. I did get out at a different address a few blocks from my place so he wouldn't have my exact location. As I tried to disembark from the car as fast as the flash, Tinder guy followed behind me, grabbed my shoulder and spun me around. Then he aggressively kissed me, like straight up manhandling my face with his tongue. Apologies for the rough description, but if I had to experience it, you do too. As Tinder Guy finally let go of my face, I tried my best to swallow back vomit. After 10 minutes of placating him, I finally got him to accept that this nightmare first date was over, that I was going to sleep, seemingly in the complete random stranger's house whom we're currently standing in front of, and he reluctantly agreed to leave. As soon as our Uber drove away with the Tinder Guy out of sight, I ran to my actual home, locked and deadbolted the door, and sank to the floor in disbelief. Once I calmed down and felt secure, I was mostly just relieved to be home safe and sound, having survived a date with a deeply unsettling, creepy, and disconcerting man. I even joked to my roommates at the time, "Well, I can't wait to never talk to that dude again." But 10 years ago, I was a naive fool. Immediately following our date, Tinder Guy sent me a barrage of texts for the rest of the night. He was fawning over me and repeatedly asking over and over again, "Can we FaceTime or video chat?" Keep in mind this was literally 1 hour after I'd gotten home. I lied, I was already in bed and basically asleep. Since I had absolutely zero intention to ever speak to this person again, I naively thought that was the end of it. Tinder Guy continued texting nonstop for the next few days. I either ignored him or sent short, curt responses. While it was a cop-out, I had planned on messaging him the truth and letting him down gently at the end of the week, once I wasn't drowning in work. As background, I worked on Capitol Hill at the time, and my office was subject to strict security screenings, metal detectors, and X-ray scanners at the entrance. This applied to incoming mail, packages, and deliveries as well. The day after this first date debacle, I got a call on my office line from the off-site Capitol Hill Package Center, saying they were processing a package for me and it would be delivered to my office in 2 days. I thought, that's odd. I'm not expecting anything. Who would mail me something? But I shrugged it off, as it wasn't the first time I'd received unsolicited packages due to the nature of my job, and I basically forgot about it. Until that Friday. Our office receptionist came to my cubicle with a huge, obnoxiously gaudy bouquet of roses and an accompanying card. Right away, I immediately knew who was responsible. The real reason I felt so deeply unsettled was that I had never told Tinder Guy who I worked for, or even which state my boss represented. I had given him literally zero clues about the member I worked for. My social media settings were tight and private anyway, and I didn't include the name of my member office in any profile, including LinkedIn. I also hadn't given him my last name. There are 535 total congressional offices on Capitol Hill, 435 House offices, and 100 Senate offices. Approximately 15,000 staffers work there. I have no idea how he found out which office I worked in based on just my first name and general employer info. Needless to say, if I wasn't creeped out enough before, I was now 1000% fully freaked out, especially reading the note that accompanied the flowers. Highlights, or rather lowlights, include comments about how great a kisser I was, what he wanted to do to me, how he hoped I could meet his family, and that he couldn't wait to see me again. Delusional is a word that comes to mind. One good thing that came out of this experience is that it finally gave me the courage to end things with a Tinder Guy via text. Dating is the worst. Until this, if I was talking to someone but knew I wasn't interested, I would still respond and engage, basically leading them on. All because I didn't want to hurt feelings and felt guilty. I now realize how unfair that was, and I've vowed to never cop out when it comes to uncomfortable issues, topics, or messages that the recipient needs and deserves to hear. It also helped instill the screw politeness mantra. I'm fortunately in a serious long-term relationship now, but while dating or even in regular life, if I feel uncomfortable or uneasy like Tinder guy made me feel, I now fight the urge to be agreeable and polite. I either directly block or cut ties, or at least explain why I'm blocking before cutting off communication. Anyway, apologies for the length of this story. I've never shared this with anyone outside my roommates at the time, so it was cathartic to type it out. Stay safe out there. I live in a small town built in bushland where a lot of elderly people reside, so it's safe to say that it has always been a safe neighborhood, and I never needed to be overly cautious. This is probably why I was often naive enough to believe that, although there was a small possibility of something bad happening to me, I thought it was far too unlikely. At the time I was 15 years old. I used to go out on weekends to visit my boyfriend who lived quite far away from me. I wasn't able to drive at that age, so public transport was my only means of visiting him. This meant walking about 20 minutes from my house to a bus stop, catching the bus into the city, and then catching a train to his house. I was used to doing the same trip every week, and I felt safe taking the trip by myself. Since I was only able to see him one day during the week, I would leave early in the morning to get there and stay until fairly late before going home. Because it was late by the time I left my boyfriend's house, and public transport was less frequent at that hour, it would have been a waste of time for him to travel any part of the way back with me. So every week I made the trip home alone. On one particular night after visiting my boyfriend, it was a usual ride on the train back into the city, and I was waiting at the bus station. The bus station is a large, open building above a number of platforms on a lower level where the buses pull in. I was waiting on the upper level on a bench in front of the stairs that led to the platform I needed for my bus home. I don't recall there being too many people around, maybe one or two people passing by, but it was essentially deserted because of the late hour. As a side note, because I was visiting my boyfriend, I had dressed up to look pretty for him. I was wearing a nice casual dress. I had straightened my long hair so that it looked neat, and I had recently received some high platform boots for my birthday. I thought they looked super cool, and they were fun to wear because I didn't feel so short. I was rifling through my bag for some gum when I noticed someone sit down on the bench next to me. Usually when someone sits on a bench that's already occupied, they leave a sort of one-person gap. But this person sat down right beside me despite the rest of the bench being empty. When I looked up from my bag, I saw a man who was maybe around 30 years old. Though I'm a terrible judge of age, so I'm not really sure. I don't remember too much about his appearance. I think he was bald or had very short hair. Being naive, I didn't think to try to remember any details about him, which I definitely would do now. When our eyes met, he asked me something along the lines of, "Have you got any weed?" At 15, I was a good kid. I didn't smoke, I didn't drink, and I certainly didn't do drugs. I told him no and continued to sit uncomfortably on the bench waiting for my bus. Then he gestured up toward the bus schedule above the stairs to my platform and asked, "Where are you heading?" As if him asking me about drugs wasn't a big enough warning sign for me to not tell him where I was going, I obediently told him that I was catching the 123 bus to XYZ. Coincidentally, he responded with, "Oh, me too." I found this unlikely since it was a small town where the bus was headed, but it was still possible. I was starting to get suspicious, and I already felt uncomfortable. I looked down at my phone in hopes that he wouldn't talk to me anymore. He noticed and asked me what phone service I was with. I told him the service and he said, "I've got a voucher for phone credit for that service, but I can't use it because I'm with a different one. Do you want it?" In Australia, where I live, we can buy prepaid credit to add call value to our phones. I politely declined, assuming he had some ill intention, though I wasn't sure what he would gain by giving me a voucher. In hindsight, maybe he was trying to get my phone number or something. I honestly don't know, and he persisted saying, "Are you sure? Why not? I can't use it." But again I said, "No thank you." Things got even weirder after that when he pointed at my big platform shoes and asked, "Is it difficult to run in those shoes?" Creepy. I lied and said, "No, I can run very well in these." He could have asked if it was difficult to walk in them, but no, he specifically asked about running. He then gestured to the stairs leading down to the bus platform and suggested that we both go down there to wait for the bus. The platform was very poorly lit, and there was probably no one down there. I did not want to be alone with him in that space. So I told him that I was going to wait where I was, but that he could wait down there if he wanted to. As expected, he didn't move. He stayed right there on the bench with me. A few moments later, I noticed someone walking toward us through the bus station. Against all possible odds, it happened to be someone I recognized. It was my friend's older brother. He was probably around 17 at the time. "Ben!" I almost shouted when I saw him. He made his way over and stood in front of me at the bench. I asked him which bus he was catching, and luckily it was the same one as me. I was so relieved. We exchanged a few words back and forth, and eventually, the creepy guy sitting next to me got up and wandered off. He didn't say anything the whole time Ben was there. Ben and I went down to the platform and got on the bus when it arrived. Surprisingly, the creepy guy did not get on the bus like he said he was going to. I told Ben what had happened and how he basically saved me. I can't imagine what would have happened if Ben had not shown up when he did. I would have gone down to the platform when the bus arrived, and hopefully the man wouldn't have done anything with the bus driver there as a potential witness. If he had gotten as far as getting on the bus with me, I was worried about the 20-minute walk from my bus stop to my house. We live on a dark street surrounded by bush on one side, and I didn't have credit on my phone to call my mom and ask for a lift home. Creepy bus station guy, I hope we never meet again. I was 12 years old and living with my aunt and uncle in a small coastal village. Nothing ever really happens in this village. Anyway, I was walking their dog Jax around the village at around lunchtime. The village is pretty much a circuit and you can walk around it easily. I usually do 2 laps of it and maybe went down a few streets. I had just started walking Jax and turned off my street onto the main street. I was near the end of it, which was a T intersection. Across the road were houses, and exactly across from the T intersection was a path leading to more houses. About 10 meters away from the intersection, a white station wagon pulled up. I had been taught about stranger danger, and my aunt and uncle always told me to be extra vigilant. I started walking a lot slower, peeking at the car. The reason I was so scared was that my mom and her friends were trying to get me. I wouldn't say kidnap, but they wanted to take me back to live with her. I looked at Jax, who started easing up a bit. I was walking past the vehicle when I heard someone speak. I turned toward the car and the window was now down, revealing a middle-aged woman. She asked, "Can I look at your dog?" I kept walking and she yelled the same thing again. I turned around. "It's not my dog," I said. "I run a dog walking business." Of course, I didn't run a dog walking business, but it was the first thing that came to mind. This was the scariest part for me. She got out of the car and came closer as I crossed the street. "Come on, can I pat the dog? Please, I won't hurt it." The voice gave me chills. It was a try-hard, innocent voice. I looked at her again. She held her hand out. That's when I ran. I saw something poking out of her pocket. It looked like a pocket knife. I know I might have been overthinking it, but my gut told me to run. I ran to the path across from the intersection. It was a bit dumb to run that way instead of straight, but I knew an easy place to hide. I ran with Jax across the road and onto the path. The lady was jogging after me. I quickly turned around and saw her reaching into her pocket. I ran as fast as I could, turned onto a neighborhood street, and decided to check if she was chasing me. Luckily, she wasn't. I patted Jax quickly and started walking at a fast pace. I ran along the street through some thin bushland and came out near the skate park. I saw her car again. It was parked next to the gutter. I looked in the window and our eyes locked. She must have been a local. Not many people know the village is circular, and that most locals take the path near the T intersection and then cut through a few yards to this spot. But they were going to the beach, not chasing someone. She just sat in her car. I didn't move, and neither did she. I was there for 10 minutes trying to catch my breath. It was the longest 10 minutes of my life. I ran across the road in the opposite direction from her. I couldn't run home because I would have had to pass her car and risk her tackling me. I heard a voice to my right and turned to see all my bullies hanging out at the skate park as usual. "Look at her run. Gotta burn off that fat, don't ya?" I didn't care. I was focused on not getting kidnapped. I turned around and saw her coming. She was running faster than before. "Damn!" I heard someone from the skate park yell. I didn't care. I jumped over the fence toward them. I didn't care that they were my bullies. The lady couldn't kidnap me with 20 other witnesses around, and people who would hopefully try to stop her. I saw that my friend, let's call him Jack, was on the phone with his grandparents and telling them what was happening. The lady was staring at me through the fence. I could feel her stare even after I turned around. She stayed there for a solid 5 minutes. I decided to turn and face her again. I was scared she was going to move and try to kidnap me. She was looking straight into my eyes. She didn't even blink, I swear. A car pulled up and a 60-year-old man and woman hopped out. The man went straight to the lady and told her to go away and asked what she was doing chasing me. They were Jack's grandparents. While his granddad was doing that, his grandma took a sneaky photo of the woman and the license plate of her car. Before the lady gave in and started walking back to her car, she said something to me that will haunt me forever. "You can move wherever you want, even across the world, but I will still find you because you, my name, are my daughter." I am still scared to this day that she might find me. Jack's grandparents and Jack dropped me off at my house and briefly told my aunt and uncle what happened. After they left, I told them everything. The police were notified. This lady has not been found. What's creepy is that she lost her child when it was born, the same year I was born. We even had the same name. The police thought the lady had a mental illness and believed I was her daughter. I told them about the flashlights in my backyard and the shadow I saw outside my window one night. I told them about the station wagon that would park in front of my school most days during lunch or recess, and how I saw her when we went out somewhere. They said she could have been following me and stalking me. One thing still makes me wonder. Why was she carrying a knife, and why did she have it in her hand while chasing me if she thought I was her dead daughter?